Vicki Mallett is the director of the Miami-Dade County Homeless Trust. I welcome her as she comes to the stage.
Thank you. I want to thank Andre and I want to thank Martha. You guys are doing some tremendous work in this community, and we can learn from you just as we've learned from Houston and Salt Lake and so many other communities who have done this work. We just celebrated 25 years, and that video was a part of our 25-year celebration where we brought together the business community. We brought together restaurants in Miami-Dade County that have been contributing to this food and beverage tax for 25 years to say thank you. It has made a demonstrable difference on the streets of Miami-Dade County. I'm just going to take you through where we were and where we are now. So 25 years ago, we had no meaningful funding. We had no community plan, and we had no leadership around the issue of homelessness. What we had was a loose-knit group of very well-meaning social service agencies, and together we had about 1,000 beds. None of those social service agencies were coordinating with one another. We had approximately 8,000 people on the street. You saw some of those pictures. We had shanty towns, we had mud flats underneath most of our overpasses, underpasses. It was a terrible sight to see. And our leadership came in the form of Alva Chapman. And some of you may know that name. Alva Chapman was the editor and publisher of Knight Ridder newspapers and the owner of the Miami Herald. And Alva was also a very spiritual person. And he drove to work every day at his offices at the Miami Herald, and he said, "This is a sea of inhumanity. This should not be. The conditions in our community are that of a third world country. We must do something about it." So together with Governor Lawton Chiles, a commission was put together. A commission, governor's task force was put together, and Alva headed that. But then came in other leaders from the community. I know you know former Governor Jeb Bush, former mayor of Miami-Dade County, Alex Pinellas. He was a commissioner at the time. A number of faith-based leaders and business community leaders came together and said, what are we going to do? How are we going to change the dynamic? And they realized they needed three things. They needed that plan, they needed that leadership, and they needed a dedicated source of funding. So the governor's task force changed into a local task force, and they went to Tallahassee, and they worked on legislation that is now codified in state statute, and essentially it was the first dedicated tax for homelessness in Miami-Dade County. What does that mean? When you eat in a restaurant in Miami-Dade County that grosses $400,000 or more and has a liquor license, there's a 1% tax added to your bill. This is for everyone in Miami-Dade County who eats out. Our tourism base, who comes and spends $100 at one of our local restaurants, $1 of that 100 comes back to the Homeless Trust. 85% comes dedicated to homelessness, and 15% of that tax is dedicated to survivors of domestic violence. It can build and operate domestic violence centers. In order to enact that plan, the enabling ordinance in Miami-Dade County, we had to have a community plan in order to enact the tax. And so those leaders got together and put together a community plan, which morphed into the 10-year plan, which morphed into what we now call today our Community Plan to End Homelessness Priority Home. And that was revamped in 2014, but we continue to look at that plan annually, and we align that plan with the federal plan to end homelessness. We align that plan with the policy priorities that US HUD sets out. They're one of our major funders. And we look at local gaps and needs through a very long process throughout the year, and that helps us update the strategies within our plan. And I think it's interesting, I report to a 27-member board. I have a staff of about 20 people. We're under the umbrella of Miami-Dade County government. We are county employees, but I report to a very strong chair and a 27-member board. And they are really the persons who make the day-to-day decisions about the continuum. We have very little interference from elected officials trying to divert our money or put it to uses that we don't think appropriate. We try to stay very housing focused in all we do. That 27-member board includes 7 appointments from the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce, 3 appointments from the League of Cities. We've got formerly homeless on that board. We have representatives from the faith-based community on that board, and what you don't always hear, we have actual providers on that board, providers who are being funded by and through the trust. So how far have we come? We were at 8,000 people on the streets 25 years ago. We just finished our point in time count, which is mandated by HUD a few weeks ago. We're just over 1,000 people on the streets of Miami-Dade County. So we've seen tremendous progress over the last 25 years. Sheltered on any given day, we have about 2,500 people who are in temporary locations. They're in emergency shelters, very, very few, but some in transitional housing, but all temporary locations. No large homeless encampments. Those shanty towns are gone. Those mud flats are gone. We do not have large groupings of tents in concentrated places. I don't know if you've been reading about Palm Beach. They're going through something now with 70 plus tents. We have hot spots. We have areas where people congregate, and we are continuing to engage those areas very aggressively to offer not just shelter, but a wide range of options to those individuals. And all of the beds in our continuum, most of the beds in our continuum, I should say, we do have some outlying providers who do their own thing, but largely it's very coordinated. You can't walk up to a shelter and get a bed. You have to go through the coordinated entry process. You have to call the helpline. You have to be being discharged from an institution, a jail, a crisis unit, hospital, or we have to literally see you on the street. And those outreach teams that you have here are the gatekeepers. You can't get into these facilities without the gatekeepers. This graph, while look confusing, just shows where we are, and you can see the downward trajectory. 3472 was our January point in time count. I should mention we do 2 counts a year just to keep ourselves honest. We do a count every January, HUD mandated in the last 10 days, and we also do a count every August. And I know you hear a lot about snowbirds and people like to be in the warm weather, and we see that, that's true. But traditionally our August count, and I can't tell you why, is about 100 to 125 people higher than our January count. And it's been consistent like that for some time. So here you see where we've gone in shelter. The emphasis is on housing. So our shelter numbers are coming down. We are not aggressively adding shelter beds. We want to have beds, so when people say, I want to go to shelter, we have it in the offer, but that is not our focus. And these are our unsheltered numbers down here. Relatively flat. We're trying everything we know to try to see a further dip in those numbers, and I'll talk about some of our strategies. So we have 2 large areas in Miami County. Miami County is a large place. You've got Aventura, you go south, you've got Homestead, you've got West Kendall, and then you've got to the beaches. The biggest concentration of our homelessness is in the city of Miami. So of that 1,000 to 1,100, about 700 people in the city of Miami, 638. Another 125 to 175 in the city of Miami Beach. And when you talk about panhandling, that's an issue they have, panhandling. South Beach, that's very, very aggressive panhandling on occasion. So a lot of our homelessness is concentrated in these 2 places. So who is our coordinated entry? Who are our outreach teams? We contract with the city of Miami to cover the city of Miami, and we contract with the beach, who covers just the beach. And then the city of Miami is also contracted to canvass the larger geographic area that is Miami-Dade County. Our goal is the same as yours. We want to prevent people from becoming homeless whenever possible. And we want to close the door, or we want to get people housed as quickly as we can once they find themselves homeless. So we've got some targeted strategies. I'm going to talk about our top 3 to 4 targeted strategies and some of the projects we're doing within those strategies. Enhanced street outreach. Yes, we're canvassing 100% of the geographic area with our homeless outreach team, some of whom have lived experience. Very important. They've been there, they've been in the shoes. I know you guys know that lesson. We added several years ago specialized outreach teams with psychiatric nurse practitioners. They go out 7 days a week, and they are medicating people. They are charged with identifying the people that you referenced that you've been looking at for 10 years and are seriously mentally ill. There's levels of mental illness. These are the most chronic people, and they go out and they medicate them. 7 days a week, they give them their meds. This really started in a very unorthodox way. Some of our most seasoned outreach workers said, they're coming out of Jackson, the public health system, and yeah, they're good for a day or 2, but then they discharge them, and they start to return to the way they were. They lose their meds, that somebody steals their meds. The outreach team started kind of sneaking the meds to them slowly and holding them for them in the back of their vans just so they could help that person stay on their medication regimen. Very small population that they're targeting in the course of the year. I would say the biggest challenge with this project is a lot of this team is healthcare professionals. They want people to well. They're focused on wellness. And we absolutely want wellness, but for the continue, the end goal is getting people housed. If somebody is highly improved and on the side of the road, that's not a win. You've got to get them in a unit of housing. One of the things we're adding to this specialized outreach team, we have an ask in Tallahassee right now, is for something called bridge housing. A lot of the individuals who are in this seriously mentally ill category will not do well if you just pluck them in a congregate living facility. They're going to be surrounded by people, their diagnoses, they do not do well around others. They need semi-private settings. So we are looking at refurbing 13 units of housing where we call it bridge housing, where we can just put somebody the moment the light bulb goes on and they say, I'm willing to come in. Because typically these individuals aren't even able to make any decisions for themselves. And then we can put them in that bridge housing setting and from there get them document ready and get them onto permanent supportive housing funded through some of our providers who require that documentation. We also partner with our managing entity for substance abuse and mental health. I don't know who it is here in our community. It was South Florida Behavioral Health Network, now called Thriving Mind. And they have the PATH resources. So these are additional outreach people. They are stationed largely at our crisis, our crisis units, and they are partnered too with our outreach teams providing mental health counseling on the street. So when they get someone who's willing to talk about housing, or we can dispatch them to somebody who's been viewing for several months, and they can engage and they coordinate with our outreach teams on the beds. Police partnerships. Can't take credit for this one. It started with the city of Miami Beach. Essentially, we have a homeless outreach team made up of police officers. And they have been looking at chronic substance abusers, specifically substance abusers who, without intervention, very small universe, they're going to die. They're going to die. So they have been charged with executing Marchman Acts so they can get these substance abusers into treatment. The opposite choice is jail, but then we coordinate with them on the back end. So after the treatment and trips to court and ex parte orders, there's a very long process here. Those individuals can be moved into our permanent supportive housing beds. I won't go through all these. Unsheltered access points. So we have one of our providers who operates a day center, and that day center provides 150 unsheltered persons breakfast every day. Our downtown Miami partnership, our downtown development authority really likes this program because it moves people over to a single location. They're all having breakfast in the morning. We recently added a lunch. We've pipelined faith-based groups in there to provide the lunch. And then more recently than that, we've added a housing coordinator so that we can have conversations with them about that short to medium term rental assistance and the possibility of moving them into apartments. The Lazarus team. So this is just one example. This is Virgil. Virgil was a prodigy. He got a scholarship to Lawrenceville Prep, very prestigious prep school. And he got accepted into MIT. He passed on MIT, instead went to Penn. In his freshman year of Penn, he had a psychotic break in his freshman year of college. He's on the street nearly half of his life. One of his brothers, interestingly enough, is an FBI agent. He had two brothers. Became a Lazarus client. We just took him to Tallahassee to tell his story. He's been housed for a couple of years now, but he said the repeated engagement was what did it for him. The repeated engagement together with the medication, but we wouldn't leave him alone. And we weren't being aggressive in any way, but we were continually engaging. And he's been housed for a couple of years now, reunited with his brothers, tremendous success story, living by himself, doing very, very well. Smart as a whip. They administer some tests to see, your cognition. And they said, okay, count from 100 down by threes. Bam, 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 bam. He did it easy as can be. He's really, really smart guy. So number 2 on our target strategy is to prioritize the creation of supportive housing. This is the housing for disabled persons who've been on your street for a year or more. And I'll start with here. We prioritize based on length of time homeless. Yes, you have to have the disability too, but length of time homeless. And we prioritize unsheltered persons on top of that. So if I have somebody who's been in a shelter for a year with a disability, and I have somebody who's been on the street a year, and both of them agree or accept housing at the same time, the unsheltered person gets the next vacancy I have. This is really game-changing when you can create units of supportive housing, and we use our federal funding process, we use our local food and beverage tax dollars to create our own housing, and we are able to even lower some of the barriers that HUD may have in place, so it's easier to get people housed. We also, I didn't talk about it, we have a jail diversion program with the 11th Judicial Circuit. Similar, people find themselves in the criminal justice system, option to go to transitional housing program or not. We've layered that with state money so that there is rental assistance coming out of those transitional programs to get somebody up and out. We've just been doing it for a few months now. We're through the first quarter. That one particular transitional program had exited eight households in the course of a year. Together with the rapid rehousing money, they exited 8 households in the first quarter of the year. So it's really showing some good signs. And I did speak about the bridge housing. So you wonder, who do you target? We target the people, what HUD has us doing, longest time homeless with a disability. But we know our clients are intersecting with lots of other systems, the hospital system, the criminal justice system. And what if we were, instead of focusing on just the clients that are impacting us the most, let's focus on the clients that are affecting the community the most. So with the help of Carrefour Supportive Housing, one of our largest affordable housing providers and supportive housing providers, we were awarded a demonstration project by the state of Florida, one of 3. And this is a rehab building, an apartment building with 34 people, and we also got 34 project-based vouchers to do a scattered site model, very small universe. We got together with the behavioral health system that I spoke of earlier, the criminal justice system, and the public hospital system. And we said, send us the top names for all your high utilizers. And I should mention University of Central Florida is involved in this study. Put the top utilizers together, and it shot out 800 names, the people that are costing the most. Yeah, I know Andre spoke about that. And we said, okay, we're going to target, we're going to cull down the list, we're going to weight it a little bit differently for certain, if you've been in the hospital more times. And then we culled it down to 200 names. Together with the outreach teams, we began to find these folks, and we've been housing them. The average length of time, they were homeless 12 years, some as many as 20. This is the first time, like the individual you mentioned, that all of these clients had ever signed a lease. And then we're 1 year into a 2-year study, and we identified the pre and post housing costs. It's incredible. The Medicaid costs went down 65%. Our jail costs were cut in half. This 50% really represents a couple of individuals being rearrested, but the bulk of the clients were not rearrested. So that is a bit skewed because basically 85% of clients remain stably housed. Hospital costs down 74%, and the income for the clients, we work with them to identify the disability and then get them the social security they need, and it was up 42%, and 83% of these clients have remained housed. So we are going to use this to sort of go to those other systems, the hospital system, the jail system, the criminal justice system, and say, look at all this savings. If we can save, maybe your investments would help us create more supportive housing to continue to do this work. And then lastly, the plain old affordable housing and ELI, extremely low income housing. What partnerships can we put together with other entities to use their resources or combine them with our resources? So we have the VASH vouchers too. It started with us reaching out to one of our 4 and our largest public housing agency. We said, we need more than just the VASH. We need 120 vouchers for veterans, and we're gonna match those vouchers with supportive services provided by the trust. We effectively ended veteran homelessness about 1.5 years ago, and now we use those same vouchers as they turn over for chronically homeless non-vets. It's been tremendous. It acts like supportive housing. Public housing. Your public housing agencies could have underutilized public housing. Units they cannot bring online because it's more than wear and tear. It's substantial damage, but they get dinged from HUD if they don't have, increased utilization year after year. We ponied up money. We said we're going to repair those units, $10,000 a unit, and then the price went up to $11,500. But we did 20, and then we did another 25. We rehabbed those underutilized units, and in exchange, I got to refer households into those units. Within the rules of HUD, You can send undocumented people who have documented children to those units. I don't know if you find this, but the hardest people to house are undocumented persons. So this was a game changer as far as helping house legal children, minor children, with an adult who was not legal in this country. Moving on. We are in the throes of a moving on initiative. Whenever HUD sends out a solicitation saying we're offering this kind of voucher or that kind of voucher, I'm on the horn with one of the four or all four public housing agencies saying, can we partner on this solicitation? Here's what I can bring to the table. I can help you write the application. In some cases, I can bring money to the table. Mainstream vouchers, there was a solicitation not too long ago. And essentially these are vouchers. They act like Section 8 for non-elderly disabled persons. Non-elderly disabled persons. And we not only had all four of our agencies get awarded, we have about 200 people now, 200 vouchers. We're getting ready to take people who've been in our supportive housing 10, 15, 20 years who no longer need supportive services and move them out to other housing. They get to choose where they live. They no longer have to have the weekly visit from the case manager. Lots of people are ready to make this move, but they need the affordability of the voucher. And what will that allow me to do? I can backfill those 200 permanent supportive housing units with 200 of the neediest, most chronic people in my community. So this is a game changer, and we're really excited about it. We've also partnered with Florida Housing Finance Corporation. We don't build housing. I don't do capital for the most part, with a few exceptions, but we are one of 4 referral agencies, and we've got that referral system down to a science. About 5 years ago, we looked at all of our supportive housing developments and said, you know, all those wait lists you're keeping for your own projects, they're gone. There is somebody who sits in my office and all he does is make referrals to the vouchers, make referrals to any of the supportive housing units we have. It's very non-subjective. So it doesn't matter if you're nice or you're cooperative, the next person that property gets is the person we tell them they're going to get. And we just need to know they're disabled, but so there is no picking and choosing of clients. And return referrals hurt them in our annual solicitation process. So they do take the clients with chronic substance abuse, with chronic mental illness, with co-occurring disorders, etc. And we have a program called Rent Connect. This is a director of landlord and recruitment and retention together with a marketing campaign where we're trying to drum up ideas, find landlords who don't know about us. Maybe they know about Section 8, but they don't know about the Homeless Trust. And we're constantly working to identify units. And there's lots of investors in our community scooping up properties, but they're not planning on selling anytime soon. Well, can we master lease that property and then have our clients come and go so we're not paying that security deposit over and over and over? And then lastly, we continue to look to evolve our homeless system. Housing first orientation, you talked about it, you know what it is. No preconditions like sobriety, treatment, or service participation. We accommodate pets at our shelters. There is no reason not to come to shelter. We can take your cat, your dog, we've even done birds. So we can take your pet. There's no reason not to come off the street because you have a pet. We will keep you together. Use diversion whenever possible. We put $100,000 most recently into diversion. That's somebody who's knocking on the shelter door saying, I need in. And we're doing a deeper dive saying, who do you know? What connections in the community do you have? It might be temporary and they might eventually enter shelter, but if I can find a safe place for that person to be tonight and work with that household to mediate whatever the disputes are, maybe put some groceries in their fridge because there's so many mouths to feed, I'm going to try to do that. And then, of course, treat everybody with dignity and respect. Another thing, I don't know where you are on this in your community, but we're getting more and more into the data sharing. It's the high utilizers. We did that with manual pieces of paper and Excel spreadsheets. We're going to try to warehouse, without asking any of those other systems, the Public Health Trust or the criminal justice system, to use a new system. We'll have a data warehouse that pulls basic information for those systems so that we can maybe change the dynamic of how we refer to those units and really impact those high utilizers.